What's up, my beautiful people? Back again with another daily dose of Reddit hope and happy, because frankly, we could all really use a bit of both right now. This is r/AskReddit, where when a potential juror tells you they need to be let go and want to talk to you in private, you really should listen to them. So, let's get to it. Okay, so the question was, lawyers of Reddit, what was your biggest oh crap moment in court? I think this qualifies, though it wasn't me that was the lawyer. Got called for jury duty, was at the jury selection phase, and they asked if anyone here thinks they should not blah blah blah. Defendant was in the room. Well, I raised my hand. The defending lawyer looked at me like, oh, this ought to be good, and asked me to explain. I suggested I tell them in private. He insisted I tell the courtroom. I said, okay, I probably shouldn't be on this jury because I was on a previous jury for this man which returned a guilty verdict. Lawyer's face went, oh crap. Commotion and a wait while they looked up records. Yep, verified. Whole jury was now tainted. Everyone goes home and they start over. I mean, how long does it take to really step outside the courtroom, give a brief explanation, and walk back in so that you don't taint the jury? Or even better, just have them write it on a piece of paper, hand it to the attorney, and be like, this is why. No, you have to insist it's said in front of everyone. I mean, frick. Not oh crap bad, more like oh crap I can't believe she said that. First jury trial, pretty serious charges. I'm cross-examining the alleged victim, and in answering my question, she says, oh yeah, I lie all the time. Needless to say, I won that trial. Yep, that would go directly to credibility. When I was 16, I tapped into a guy's bumper at a red light. Very minor impact, the car was almost completely stopped. I spent the next 5 years getting sued by this guy who alleged all sorts of ridiculous injuries. When it finally came to trial, it somehow came out that the guy would take 3-mile walks. When he was on the stand, my attorney asked him if he was, in fact, able to walk for up to 3 miles. I can walk 10 miles, he bragged. Jury didn't give him a dime and he had to pay court costs. I have said this before on a different post about clients blowing their cases. Keep your story straight. Reposting myself from years ago. Story from a friend of mine. He was defending a guy in court, don't remember what he was charged with. The main witness for the prosecution was on the stand and was asked if she could identify the defendant. She was scanning the courtroom and seemed confused. My friend was already silently celebrating because if she couldn't identify him, he could probably get all charges dropped. As he was mentally adding this case to the win file, he happened to glance over at his client, who had just helpfully raised his hand to make it easier for her to identify him. Even the judge facepalmed on that one. Oh, this belongs in World's Dumbest Criminals. Never ask a question to which you don't know the answer. Prosecutor suggested to my client that the canned goods he had burgled were to be used to trade for drugs. Me, thinking the idea was ludicrous, asked my client whether he had ever traded food for drugs, to which he replied that he once exchanged a frozen chicken for heroin. Needless to say, I didn't win that one. Sat in the public gallery at a bail hearing for a man accused of heinous crimes against a very, very young female relative. The judge started laying out the conditions of bail, and one of them was to surrender his passport. The man turned to his attorney and said, loudly, words to the effect of, "But you said I could fly back to my home country." The judge stopped himself and revoked the man's bail. Edit, this post brought to you by the words flight and risk. Also, his home country was out of the reach of extradition. Edit again, this was not the USA. Every country has foreigners. Never volunteer information. A lawyer I used to know was in court on a work injury case. The judge asked his client, just what is the nature of your injury? The client replied, I can't raise my arm this high anymore, while she raised her arm up to show just how high she couldn't raise it. Way to blow your own case. I was prosecuting a contempt action in family court, something that basically never works, and everyone in the room could tell I was winning. The other side was unprepared, out of arrogance, and I was basically ripping this guy to shreds on cross-examination, which his lawyer didn't even think would happen because he expected the case to be dismissed. At the end of the trial, the judge ruled for me and stated that she found the defendant's testimony to be untrustworthy. I was shocked at winning a contempt trial to begin with, but then this exchange happened. Defendant's attorney: Your Honor, now that you have found my client's testimony to be untrustworthy, I'm requesting a continuance in order to prepare further witnesses. This concept is shocking in and of itself, because to even think you can bring more witnesses after you rest your case is laughable. Judge: You had your shot and you missed, counsel. Defendant's attorney: Your Honor, there was no way I could have anticipated that you'd find my client's testimony to be untrustworthy, and as such, I didn't have the opportunity to prepare other witnesses in support of his position. Judge: That may be an argument for your carrier, counsel, but it holds no water with me. See you this afternoon for sentencing. For those who didn't pick up on it, the judge basically told the lawyer, on the record in front of his client, that she expects him to get sued for malpractice because he screwed up so royally. That crap was mind-blowing on multiple levels. Wow. Just wow. I mean, seriously, I don't even have words. That's just ridiculous. You don't come to court that unprepared. Frick. I was the defendant, representing a nonprofit that I volunteered for. The plaintiff was a 60-something grandma who was looking for a retirement settlement after falling out of her jacked-up pickup truck in our parking lot. The premise of her case was that our parking lot was in bad shape, it was, and that she fell into a pothole and broke her leg, which resulted in her having to take Coumadin and diminished her enjoyment of salads at the Friday night fish fry. No, really. It was going along fine until my lawyer put up a photo of the pothole taken the day of the incident, filled to the rim with water after a recent rain. He asked the lady if she had gotten her foot wet, to which she replied that she couldn't recall. He talked a little more about how perhaps if her foot wasn't wet, it might have been because she fell out of the truck and didn't really fall into the pothole. He asked again if her foot was wet, and she affirmed that yes, her foot was wet. The oh crap moment came when he went back to his desk, flipped through her deposition, and read the part where she was extremely adamant her foot wasn't wet. Then he did some fancy legal stuff, the case was thrown out, and I went back to work. Gotta love when you can win on a technicality like that. Opposing counsel was a nightmare. Everything late, his work was extremely subpar, and so forth. Accused me of lying multiple times when he had dropped the ball. During another hearing in which he did another dumb move, judge says, I'm glad you're the last case on the call and all the other attorneys have left the room, so they aren't here to hear me say that you are a terrible attorney. Ooh, that had to hurt. I was just interning in court during law school, but I'm a lawyer now. Fight in a club. Someone had broken someone else's jaw and had 6 friends with him that insisted he had been identified wrongly because he never had a beard and the victim said he had a beard. They used a very specific phrasing to the tune of, my friend doesn't have facial hair because he's a professional in the food industry and it would go against the regulations. After 3 of the witnesses had repeated the exact phrasing, the judge stopped one to ask if he knew what a couple of the terms in that line meant, and the witness couldn't explain it. Defense lawyer got busted for instructing the witnesses. She'd also gotten the defendant to reject a plea deal that exchanged prison time for a fine and community service. Why would you not tell your client to take that plea deal? Why? That seems like a no-brainer. I was at a hearing arguing that my client was wrongfully terminated because the employer failed to abide by the proper procedures. During the hearing, a witness for the employer tried to offer documents that were fraudulently altered in order to make it look like the proper procedure was followed. I noticed the alteration, opposing counsel quickly got that witness out of the room, and after a quick adjournment, my client got a large settlement. Oh. And the thing is, it was probably bigger than he would have settled for initially because they got caught cheating. Unbelievable. Watching a hearing when the defendant said, I mean, I did stab her, but it was a gentle stabbing. There's no such thing as a gentle stabbing. Stabbing is stabbing. Now, there are various degrees of severity, yes, but stabbing is stabbing. I mean, how would you even define a gentle stabbing? Frick. The best thing I can come up with is a dermatologist or something like that popping a zit. That's the closest thing that comes to mind about a gentle stabbing, and even that is still kind of technically a stabbing. Speaking of, don't go watching those videos on YouTube. I used to think it was funny, and now they're just gross. Not exactly in court, but I was defending a juvenile robbery case where there was very little evidence. There were supposed to be 2 guys, but they only picked up this one kid. He had no stolen property on him, he was picked up outside his own home, wearing different clothes than the victim had actually said. This kid was on the honor roll at school, his family seemed kind and were involved, he wrote poetry and played instruments. I actually believed it was a legit mistaken identity case. I went to meet with one of the kid's mentors for a character reference, and he exactly matched the description of the other robber. That's when you're like, okay, thank you, I've got enough, bye. And then you try to never mention that reference ever again. Sitting in court, doing some plea paperwork with a defense attorney for a go-home plea agreement, where the person is released from custody and doesn't have to do jail time, we hear this to our left, and we look to see this guy sitting in the gallery all by himself, sitting in a cloud of the biggest vape hit I have ever seen. Then he has the audacity to tell the judge, it went off in his hand. Do not pass go, do not go free that day. So for anyone wondering why this might be an issue, apart from smoking inside of a federal building or just a government building in general, I think, most judges have very, very, very strict rules for their courtrooms, and it varies from one judge to the next. Doing something like this is extremely disrespectful, and you'd be hard-pressed to find a single judge that would put up with it. Lawyer here. I had a pretrial conference at 9 a.m. at a court about 2 hours away, so I wake my butt up super early to drive in crappy weather to the conference. I get there and we're waiting for the other, in town, attorney. All the while, I'm grumbling to myself about how I'm from out of town and I can still make it on time. Finally, the court calls the other attorney's office and gets a receptionist who tells us through tears that the other attorney passed away the night before. Needless to say, I was just happy to still be alive, and we rescheduled for a few months later. Yeah, I think that's probably one of the few valid excuses as to why you're that late. In multiple senses, I just realized. Huh. I'm not an attorney, but a reporter whose beat is the county courthouse. So I've had plenty of these moments happen in front of me. A guy was convicted of attempting to murder several police officers. At his sentencing, the prosecutor revealed the defendant got a prison tattoo while he was awaiting sentencing of a tombstone with the names of all the cops he attempted to kill. But the defendant still had the audacity to beg for a lenient sentence. He got a few 100 years in jail. Oh my gosh. So totally ADD thing here. My wife and I love Forensic Files, the TV show, and there was a case where a guy was accused of killing these 2 women and then burning an apartment to try and cover it up. And eventually, forensics links it back to him, he's arrested, he goes to jail, and he shows up for the first day of court with 2 new teardrop tattoos, which supposedly you get 1 teardrop for every person you've killed. And when the prosecution pointed this out, he said that no, they were tattoos to remember a couple of friends of his that died in a car accident, which he conveniently got once he was arrested. It's like, dude. Not a lawyer, but was working at the jail when an inmate came back from court and immediately went on suicide watch. Apparently, he was up for a plea deal and was only looking at 6 months, but started questioning some of the facts, which let in a ton of previously denied evidence. This new evidence linked him to 6 B&Es and rapes. He walked out of court facing a 99-year sentence, which he was certain to get, all because he opened his mouth. Edit. The lawyers were arguing over a pair of the victim's panties. He apparently chimed in with something he shouldn't have known. That brought in evidence that was previously inadmissible to not only this case, but 5 other burglaries and rapes. Evidence which, by the transport officer's words, was good enough to metaphorically screw him for 100 years. And I'm glad. Someone like that deserves a 99-year sentence. There's more funny and uplifting Ask Reddit if you click the button on your left, or if you want to see the video YouTube thinks is best for you, hit the button on the right. Now you guys stay safe, stay healthy, I will see you all tomorrow. Until then, I'm Exile451. Stay beautiful, people.